Now, I thought we'd get Senator David Leyonhjelm from the Liberal Democrats on the line, A, because he's always interesting, always got interesting points of view, but I also wanted to use him as a little bit of a meter in terms of this proposal by the Labor Party. It's being put forward by the Labor Party, and what they want is a code of conduct for parliamentarians in specifically race matters, but also, quote, truthfulness. And I wanted to know whether anyone thinks that will work, and I thought the best person to ask in Parliament itself was Senator David Leyonhjelm. Good afternoon to you, Senator.
Good afternoon, Nick.
Do you think that has any chance of working?
None whatsoever, and nor should it really. It's about virtue signalling. It's sort of like saying, oh, my manure doesn't stink as much as those awful people who don't agree with me, as much as their manure stinks. It's meaningless, symbolic claptrap. The funny thing is, what's prompted it is Pauline Hanson's first speech in the Senate, in which she said, we're being swamped by Muslims. Well, last time I looked, being Muslim faith was a religion. Islam is not a race, it's a religion, and you can convert to Islam, in fact, in some countries, and if you happen to fall under the control of Islamic State, you're forced at gunpoint and under threat of death to convert to Islam. So suggesting that that's a race, I think, is seriously misguided.
It is, and also this, quote, quest for truthfulness in Parliament. I mean, it's a very noble idea, but your version of the truth, I'm sure, is very different from my version of the truth, which is very different from other politicians' version of the truth. The truth is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
Well, to a degree it is. There are objective facts, provable facts. But yes, I mean, truth when it comes to these sorts of qualitative matters is to some extent subject to what you think the truth is, and it actually says something about the Labor Party that they think they require a pledge to prove how truthful they are. It makes you wonder what sort of culture they have in the Labor Party.
Well,
my preference would be that we have a pledge for immigration. I don't like the idea of banning immigrants of any description in particular, based on what group they belong to. But I do believe we need to be proud of our Australian values. So perhaps a pledge for immigrants, even for Australians if they like, on things that unite us, immigration, assimilation type issues. So votes for women, the freedom to marry who they like, not discriminating against gays, not throwing them off the top of buildings. And even inherent rights like free speech and freedom of religion and equality before the law and those sorts of things. If we're going to have a pledge, let's make it useful rather than this airy-fairy stuff.
Well, we'll throw that out to the listeners as well. What do you think of that idea, of that pledge? 96 900 693 13 13 32. And also, I reckon it's a bit rich too for the Labor Party, well, for either party, but the Labor Party to say, let's have a code of conduct about truthfulness. And of course, they're coming off the Mediscare campaign at the last election. And of course, the Liberals had the carbon tax campaign where the whole world was going to fall down. Neither side can actually hold the moral high ground here, can they?
You're absolutely right. Yes, truth in politics, they don't combine anywhere near as often as we'd like them to, I'm afraid. And yes, the idea of having a pledge specifically to hold politicians, people to the truth, kind of defies what we know about politics.
It certainly does. A couple of other issues, Senator. I know this is one of your passionate issues as well. I was quite bamboozled, really, to read that it was 20 years yesterday since the first legal voluntary euthanasia was undertaken in the Northern Territory, and of course that created a furore and led to that being shut down. What do you think about the current move in Victoria to move towards legalising voluntary euthanasia, and is it going fast enough?
Well, yes, nothing's happened in the last 20 years except perennial discussions about it. We are in the really bizarre situation where it's not illegal to take your own life, but then if you get to the point where you're too ill, too feeble, and you would like to die if you could, but you can't take your own life, not allowed to ask anybody, or you're allowed to ask somebody, but they're not allowed to help you to die, irrespective of the fact that if you were capable of doing it yourself, you would take your own life. It's a very cruel situation. I used to be a veterinarian, and I used to put animals to sleep all the time, and I think we treat our pets with more compassion than we treat our fellow human beings. It's something that also the general public is absolutely behind me on this issue. There's at least 70% of the population believes that at least under some circumstances, getting help to end your own life, in other words, assisted suicide, shouldn't be a crime, shouldn't be illegal, and yet you can get sent, in some states, sent to jail for life if you do help somebody to die at their request. It's really a shameful situation. The rest of the world is slowly moving away from that position, and it's high time we did in Australia too. So I'm encouraged by what's happening in Victoria, even though I think it's baby steps.
I agree with you, Senator. I think the sooner we do it, the better. And one final question. Later in the show, we'll be speaking to the Acting Education Minister down here in Victoria, who's furious after the meeting in Adelaide today. Means that effectively, she says, Victoria will lose about $1 billion in education funding. Any way you look at it, education funding in Australia is an absolute mess, isn't it? Because of all the various components, federal, state, and various bits and bobs. You've come up with an alternative plan.
Yes, we've had this notion in Australia that the only thing it needs to do better is to throw more money at it. And it's now becoming perfectly obvious it's not a matter of money. It's what aspects you throw money at, what you do with the money that matters. Now, one of the things that concerns us is that the Commonwealth Government really doesn't have jurisdiction over education. It's a state issue, and yet they throw all sorts of money at the states, very large amounts of money at the states, and the states spend it all. So you've got, on the one hand, the Commonwealth Government raising the money, and then the states spending the money on education, and so neither of them is particularly responsible for the end result of what they're doing. So we had the Parliamentary Budget Office look at what would be the impact if the Commonwealth stopped spending or stopped giving the states money for education, apart from comparisons between the states, so NAPLAN and My School, basically. And not surprisingly, a very large amount of money would be saved, $58 billion over the forward estimates period would be saved from the budget. So the Commonwealth Government gives the states vast amounts of money for education every year, which the states then duly spend and then whinge when they don't get enough. So what the purpose of it was to show that the Commonwealth could balance its budget if it didn't have to give the states all that money. It could balance the budget very quickly, in fact, if it didn't have to give all that money to the states. It could lower taxes.
Okay.
And of course that would, from our point of view, that would be a very good thing. Every reduction in taxes helps in our view. And then the states could then decide, well, what's a better way of funding education than the way they're doing now? Should they raise an income tax, which is a possibility, or is it really such a great idea to make public educations, government schools, free, irrespective of how well off you are? Shouldn't they put a means test on it so that if you're a multi-millionaire and you still want to send your kids to a state school, why shouldn't you pay towards that education?
Okay, then, Senator, some interesting ideas there. Certainly it can't continue as it is. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Senator David Leyonhjelm.